Hi, it's Des here. I'm in Denver in Colorado. I'm at Commvault GO 2019. I had the pleasure of catching up with Patrick McGrath. Now, Patrick's a product management lead for Commvault Activate. Patrick, thanks so much for joining me on camera. It's great to see you.
Thanks a bunch, Des. Really happy to be here.
Now, firstly, congratulations on an amazing event.
Thank you.
This is just spectacular. I love the format that you've got, like on day zero, if you've got training, certification, and the opportunity to network with people. You had a great dinner last night.
Yeah,
and
terrific.
just walking around the floor here, everybody's looking at something. They're engaged, they're not just wandering around eating your food, which is a clear success sign, right?
Right.
Now, so Activate, maybe just give, people know Commvault as a brand and the company, they probably use your products, they know of Activate. Maybe for folk who aren't overly familiar with it, just give us a 30,000 foot of view of kind of what Commvault Activate is, where it fits in the market, and we can talk about some of the use cases.
Sure. So the traditional position for Commvault has really been in the backup recovery space,
Indeed.
right? So if I take a look at that, that usually means taking a look and protecting data blobs, right? But Activate is really focused on the information that's held within those blobs.
Right.
So as we start taking a look at what that actually means for customers, there's a huge amount of value and a huge amount of risk that sits inside those blobs. And really what we're trying to do with Activate is to uncover that value, uncover that risk, try and find ways to create efficiencies in that data based on how old it is, what kind of information is stored within it, and so on. So it's a very exciting opportunity. So think about Activate as a platform where we're doing things like content indexing and extracting information from the files that we're dealing with. We do data profiling. We provide visualizations and workflows on that data based on the kind of outcomes that people are trying to achieve. And ultimately all of that is auditable so that they can figure out, hey, have I actually done the right thing with that data?
Right.
So we express that right now in three use cases that we're really trying to scale into the marketplace at the moment. We've got file storage optimization. So if you can imagine, we harvest a lot of that technical metadata from data that either Commvault backs up or that we look at from live data sources.
Okay.
And we survey that for a couple of reasons. The first one might be, is there information that Commvault is not backing up at the moment in a data protection strategy, right? So we can take a look at those live data sources and say, hey, here's maybe some critical data that you may want to consider pulling into your protection process. The second thing that we do is actually use it for profiling. What kind of efficiencies could you drive? What kind of optimization should you be looking at for performance, for availability, for risk in that data? Maybe as you're moving towards the cloud from an on-premises organization or between clouds or even maybe back to an on-premises situation. So if you can figure out that maybe 40% of the data that you've got is old and it's stale, why migrate it?
Right.
And so Activate is really taking a look at those kind of opportunities within file storage optimization, plus the ability to be able to lock down access to that data. The second big thing that we're doing there is sensitive data governance. So as we've seen privacy regulations like GDPR or CCPA coming into existence, and this is a general trend across the world, we're able to actually go through and profile data for personally identifiable information or other types of personal data so that we can visualize what that looks like across your infrastructure, and you can actually start prioritizing your action to clean it up proactively, get rid of it before it's a problem, or respond to those needs to disclose what personal information may exist about a person, or even delete it, maybe even delete it from a backup, right?
Gotcha. Which is becoming more and more important because around the world the right to be forgotten is a big thing, and also someone decides to deregister or whatever, you've got to be able to remove it in a timely fashion, which for most companies is almost impossible unless you're running your technology.
It totally is, and I think part of the challenge is that it's not just a binary situation, because you may have data that the company has to keep for compliance reasons. So there's actually got to be a really strong partnership in decision making between the IT group and the various functional groups within the organization. So we have workflows that are built in for review and approval, so the right information is disclosed, or the right information is deleted, or the right information is quarantined, right? So that, I think, is a really interesting thing about sensitive data governance. And of course, the third one, which we've been in the market with for a while, is all around sort of the e-discovery type scenario of being able to collect information from emails or files throughout your system, and pull into data sets that you can effectively hand off to your legal analysts or to other third-party systems that do that kind of analysis, maybe investigations, Freedom of Information Act, open records, all that kind of thing. So those are the three key use cases that we're looking to scale into the market.
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing more and more is interest from organizations to do stuff that's beyond those three.
Those outliers you hadn't necessarily anticipated that someone's created, because I think that's the world we live in now, isn't it? No matter how smart we are, somebody's going to come up with some cunning way to put the technology to another use we hadn't anticipated that opens up a whole new market for you.
So, I mean, it really has, and I think the use cases that we have are primarily around trying to drive efficiencies or trying to manage risk in some way. But companies really, if they had their choice, that's not what they want to spend their money on, right? They want to try and figure out, how do we better our customer experience? How do we do more strategic sourcing with the right partners? How do we take a look at what's happening with our products so that we can make those the most effective products, right? So these are a set of things that a lot of organizations, and interestingly in the public sector is a big space where they're looking to say, you know what, your backup administrators and storage administrators are sitting on top of the largest data lakes that company will ever have,
these gold mines.
And they don't know it. And the organization doesn't know it, and not only could it be a gold mine, but it could also be a landmine, right?
Well, actually, that was something I was going to mention, but I didn't want to say landmine. But you're absolutely right, because nobody wants to be on the front page of any newspaper on Monday morning for a data breach or ransomware or cybersecurity issue,
right.
or even just basic governance compliance, right? And the thing for me is, like, listening to what you're saying there, and certainly from my experience with the product, it seems to be it's an insights product. You provide analytics and I guess discovery inside the data you've got down to record and block level in many ways, but it provides those insights. This whole drive to become a data-driven decision-making company through the digital transformation process, this is not only possible now, this is really the new normal, isn't it?
I think so, and actually, we're looking at beyond insight, right? Because I think if we say that insights are out there to prompt action, then why not actually take action as well? So we provide a set of workflows that allow people to actually remediate data from the data source or the backup. We support data policies where you can help scale the kind of behavior that you want to be applied to those data sources themselves. And I think the ability to not just survey, to not just analyze and get the insights, but to take action is really where most systems are really trying to go. And if you can build an ecosystem around that and really leverage at the platform level, like we have folks that are actually interfacing with Activate today at an API level, really using the platform to connect to things like business intelligence tools, and we're working with a number of other partners at the moment who've got amazing visions around what they want to do with machine learning, supervised and unsupervised machine learning for various outcomes, really to be interacting at the platform level, and this is really exciting time for us.
I can only imagine you'd leap out of bed every day wanting to go to work. I mean, the pain points you're solving are I guess, table stakes. But I love the fact that you mentioned that you're not just providing insights, you're getting to the point where you're doing almost predictive analysis. That is, hey, did you know this is about to happen, or if you continue doing this, this is definitely going to happen, or it's 99%. Or even to the point where I imagine you can build models inside the tool now where you're at the bleeding edge of the technology space in a positive sense, so you're ahead of the curve. So you're seeing things today that people in a month or 2 or 6 months or a year's time are going to decide, hey, we need this. So you've got to be there, you've got to develop it, make it available, productize it, and make it a service. But now you've got this ecosystem from what you're telling me, which is in many ways a great way to make it self-sustaining, because once you build an ecosystem around something, the community supports it, the industry supports it, organizations want it, so you're not having to sell it anymore. You're really there supporting, sustaining the demand for an already hungry audience. Yeah,
no, I think that's exactly right, and this whole issue of getting to a predictive model is really important. So we actually did that in other parts of our product with ransomware to be able to sort of predict, all right, hey, somebody's gone ahead and encrypted a file, is that what is normal? Yeah, so we're actually looking to apply the same sort of predictive models looking forward for things like, how are people accessing information? Are there anomalous events that are taking place in terms of that? Is there anomalous types of content that are hitting that could indicate risk? Or maybe they could indicate other kinds of business events, right? So I think, moving into the historical models of moving from sort of an operational view and getting operational insights to kind of getting into a predictive model to a prescriptive model, I think everybody's also looking, how can we take a look at robotic process automation and all those other things, leveraging the ecosystem and leveraging the core Activate platform as well.
And it seems like this whole stack as well, when we talk about, in software, we talk about the stack that's from code to executable and all the infrastructure. It seems to me that the platform provides a way for multiple parts of the organization to do this. I mean, not just the operational piece of, hey, something's going to fail, but also you're coming in and out of compliance and governance, or you're falling outside of the regulatory requirement. But compliance officers now across organizations having a whole broad range of the view of the organization, inside and outside.
Right.
This to them must be an absolute boon, because a lot of things they're having to do manually, go and do data discovery, asking people to get extracts. Now they've effectively got a dashboard that they can set some of these models up, test them, run them, and then set and forget them and allow them to alert them. Instead of, they don't have to get up in the morning going, oh, I've done my checklist.
Right,
the system's doing it, right?
So that's exactly what we're seeing, and I think if you took a look at the themes, and we've talked about this, Des, about the themes of digital transformation, right? The discussions around compliance actually start moving into a much bigger issue for digital business, which is around how do I keep and generate trust? Right. How do I generate the trust of my customers, my employees, my partners, the regulatory agencies and other groups that we're dealing with. Right. And so a lot of the compliance have actually been trying to drive towards some of those goals, but I think people have started to realize that those goals have a much bigger impact to the organization than the compliance group that are sort of the node department, right? And
a cascading flow-on effect as well, because often we fight fires in a reactive response, and now we're sort of seeing a proactive capability here. And if one part of the organization get to a certain level of compliance, because we see things like people do, they go through various audits, like ISO 27000X, right, for security compliance, or 9000X for standards compliance and so forth. But now I see the organization saying, well, I don't just want software assurance, I don't just want infrastructure assurance, I don't just want data protection backups. There's a stack of these things, and I see this now, from what you're telling me, being able to actually help us build the stack, that as part A is successful and predictably successful, part B then feeds to be good, and I end up getting to the point where almost like a green light effect, that this goes from like starting a race, right? It goes red, orange, green. We start to build this thing, all of a sudden we've got these dashboards saying everything's green across the board. We can now focus on where the problems are and plan ahead of it. So I think that stack is becoming so important now that organizations can't just reactively fight fires, you've got to get ahead of the curve and stay there and maintain it, as opposed to just the annual audit.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and I think it's kind of been the holy grail for a long time, right, to manage by exception, but I think with the volumes and the types of data that we're pulling into these processes now, with the algorithms that are being used, supervised and unsupervised, we're getting to a point where we can take a look at profiling this data, highlighting events, figuring out, like we have for backup over the last couple of years, how do you get rid of the noise and really focus on what's important? And I think we're approaching a point where people are really going to be able to leverage the data to drive those insights to get to the outcomes that make them faster, make them more trusted in a quality way. So.
Well, you touched on an interesting thing there. I mean, you've had a couple of decades of making sure that people can go to sleep at night and not worry about their data and protecting the data. Now you're doing that in a number of areas around sort of compliance and other things. But one of the interesting things you mentioned before I got on camera is you've actually put this in place yourselves. You use it internally. So people say you eat your own dog food, but you are your own first customer.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So we would use it as you would expect, with the three primary use cases that we're selling to customers, but we've got some very interesting things that we're doing. Right now, for example, we're using the Activate platform really as a data analysis environment that we can use for predicting, for example, what's happening with our sales pipeline. Right. So we're connecting to what's happening in our marketing, we're connecting to the stuff that we've got in Salesforce, into our fulfillment systems, and soon into our support systems, so that structured data sets and unstructured data sets can actually be matched in terms of the identity and in terms of these things as information silos being brought together. But actually taking a look at things like sentiment analysis. So if we got stuff in the pipeline where we're seeing regularly negative sentiment attached to something where there's a big deal in play. So those are things where people really want to know that, so that we can actually shape the pipeline and try to get rid of some of those problems and perceptions from the customers. So that's just one example of what we're doing with Activate internally.
And from my own experience with it, and you touched on it before, in that we're thinking a lot about predictive and future stuff, but you can poke this at any data set, structured, unstructured, as you said, and it can go through the entire history and learn of what we've known historically so it can plan for what's going forward. And I guess that's the beauty of the machine learning capability of artificial intelligence, that we can look at the past, model what the future might be, and then see if they are in line or on par with what our expectations are, and respond to that, right?
And you know what's the key to that? Is actually having the data that actually you run through those models to validate and evolve the models, right?
Access to it securely.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that the interesting thing about this is that now we're going to see an opportunity where people can think more cleverly and intelligently and strategically about the treatment of their data.
Yep.
Because often, as you said, you put it into a data lake, it turns into a data swamp. You've got a whole bunch of stuff in backup, you don't know what's in there.
Absolutely.
And if you've got stuff in there, it takes ages to find. I think when we think about data in general, I start thinking about this challenge of, well, what treatment is being applied to the data? What treatment can we provide to it? What value can we get out of that? Are there any outlying examples of use cases that you hadn't anticipated that people are using for? I mean, I love the idea that you're using inside your own platforms and for everything from center analysis. Have you had any outliers that sort of surprised you where you looked and went, hey, we didn't expect that?
I think one of the things that we saw over the last year in particular was organizations that have kind of delved into the trough of disillusionment with the data lake, right?
Trough of disillusionment, I like that.
And so, I think what we've seen is that a lot of organizations are getting bogged down with a lot of the data plumbing of how do they get data in there. One of our partners, LucidWorks, actually had a really interesting blog recently where they say, is search the new data warehouse?
Oh,
right? And so, if we've got access to such a huge amount of information pulsing through an organization and the archives of all of that, the ability then to start applying search and applying those algorithmic models with supervision that gives you the chance to be able to say, look, I've got a big data project. We've got mired down in a number of the plumbing issues, and plumbing's really important, right? Yeah. But if it takes you 6 months to get to a point where your stakeholders have got a 4-month attention span, right, you need to be able to start showing value in POC. So this is an ideal use for the kind of data and the kind of technologies that we're using at the moment, and a lot of interest in it right now.
Absolutely, even though money's cheap these days, that whole attention span and I guess appetite for risk and cost is shrinking dramatically.
Right.
We talk about fail and fail fast from an agile development process, but now organizations up to the CEO are saying, well, I want it faster, I want it cheaper, I want it keener, and I'd like it yesterday. Have it in blue.
Yeah.
Well, one last question for you. Where do we see this going? I mean, to me, it seems like just an open sheet of paper of possibilities. Based on what you're seeing, I mean, you're a better position than anyone on the planet to know where this is going. Inside Commvault, you're using it, the world's attaching to it. Where do you see this sort of going? Where are the ideal spaces for this to expand to and grow to?
So for me, I think the real potential for us is actually the fact that we have the data, we have our hooks in the data, we have some data policies that can help scale that. But we have a platform that can be used to scale to any number of use cases. So for me, what I'm really looking forward to is building an ecosystem of partners who have the technical expertise, they have the knowledge of the vertical markets, they have the geographic specialization, and they have the bandwidth, right? And so what I'd really like to see is an ecosystem of organizations that are actually able to build up additional value on top of that data, additional insights, to work with bi-directional integrations that really help to fulfill some of these strategic goals out in the market. So that's one of the things that I would love to see happen over the next couple of years. I
think it'd be a great progression, because I know a lot of banks used to worry about fintechs because they thought they're competitors, but fintechs are invariably adding value.
Yes.
And I love the fact that Commvault as an organization has always been an API economy in many ways. Now you're expanding on that. I think that Lego block mentality has set you apart for so long. It's unbelievable. It's like Commvault and spacebar, everyone else.
Right.
Well, no, I think that's an exciting future you've got ahead of you, and my concern is that just keeping up with it. I think that'll be a challenge, because you'll end up with this deluge of opportunity from clients who finally realize what Commvault Activate can do, banging on your door saying, Patrick, come and have a conversation with us. And I guess that's my last question for you, is how soon in sort of the maturity curve of organizations' digital transformation journey and realization around data protection should they be reaching out and saying, Patrick, come have a conversation? I mean, the obvious question is immediately, but where in that journey should they sort of reach out and say, look, we're thinking about what we're doing with data, we're thinking about the backups you're running for us and the data protection, we're concerned about compliance and governance and regulatory and cybersecurity, and when's the right time for them to reach out and just start that conversation, get some consulting support and strategic and road mapping and planning to do something about it?
Yeah, well, I think, and we were talking about it yesterday, right? Digital transformation is not just something that's happened in the last 5 years, right? People have been worried about these issues for a long time, and we've got now a number of accelerators. AI and machine learning is probably the latest set of buzzwords around it. So what I think is really important is for those organizations to really kind of have an idea on what they could do with their businesses. I see it less as a technical issue and more in the openness of how they can use data to fuel their ideas about generating new business models, generating new products into the market. So that's a real traditional kind of digital transformation theme. But I think now with these accelerators, there's a lot of different opportunities, but it takes that kind of mix of entrepreneurship and vision and data literacy within those companies to do it. And I think trying to address those problems before the customer is ready, I think is a great way to lose money quickly. So my take is, have a game plan for what you want to do with your business, and then seek those partners out that actually understand data and understand effectively how you can apply that data. I think we've got a great set of partners with Commvault that I think would be good to reach out to. You could definitely have folks talking to Commvault directly, but I think that the discussions need to be had now, because there's companies that are thriving and companies that are not thriving. If you take a look at the retail space, a lot of companies have not adopted digital soon enough.
And they're just not going to survive.
Right.
Or if they do, they're going to hurt a lot.
Right.
It was one of those, I think there was a throwaway line that those companies that leverage and innovate with technology early invariably get such a lead on the competitors will never actually catch up.
Yeah,
Patrick,
I think it's
been
true.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for giving us a rundown on what Commvault Activate is at 30,000 foot and getting into the weeds of some of the use cases and I guess the future vision on it. I imagine that in a year's time we're going to talk about something that's just even more exciting and interesting, in that the people have come to you with things that you hadn't even imagined. So yeah, I think you've got an exciting year ahead of you.
Yeah.
And congratulations on a fantastic event.
Thanks so much, Des.
Appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
And we'll keep in touch, and hopefully we'll have you on the podcast soon.
Sounds great.
Cheers, thank you.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.